And he turned and said to them, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he's laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king going out to wage war against another king will not sit down first and consider whether he's able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, then whilst the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for the terms of peace. So therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions. Salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, then how can its saltiness be restored? Is it fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile? So they throw it away. Let anyone with ears listen." This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Many parents could tell you that they have stories about their most embarrassing moments. And that those stories about most embarrassing moments often take place around things that their children said that they really wish those children would not have said. Do you have any of those kinds of stories? My mother had one of those kinds of stories, and I'm happy to say it wasn't about me, it was about my brother. And it was a story that took place in the life of the church. You know, the church is fertile ground for funny things happening and those kinds of stories. And so this is my mother's story. She was sitting on this side of the church, kind of down front, and my brother and I were small, and we were both sitting with her. And, you know, an hour's worth of church is a very, very, very long time in the life of a child, right? And a child can occupy himself or herself only so long with things like looking up at the chandeliers and counting the number of chandeliers, or if you have those kind that have the light bulbs, you know, in the chandeliers, then you count the number of light bulbs, or you try to see which light bulbs are not burning, you know, those kinds of important things. And then if there are boards on the wall, as there were in our old sanctuary, you count the number of boards going up the wall, and then inevitably the bees get in the building, you know, and you count you count the number of bees that are flying around, and you pay attention to which person they're closest to, but all of that only takes us a short amount of time, right? And then there's still the rest of the service to go. And so it was with my brother on this particular day. And so after all of that was accomplished, he had waded through all of those important matters in his mind for the day. And his eyes began to be trained on the woman who was sitting in front of us. She was an elderly woman. And he wasn't taking in her whole personhood, but rather he was focused on her hair. Well, I don't know if any of you remember the hair dyes of the 1950s or not, but suffice it to say, they left a little bit to be desired. Do you remember that? And they might be characterized as when you're washing away the gray, you're washing in the blue. And so my brother took particular notice of the color of this woman's hair, and so he began to have these deeply important questions to ask my mother at that exact moment in time. And so he began to say, "Mama, why does that woman have blue hair?" And my mother did what any mother would do. She fixed her eyes on the preacher so intently and tuned out everything, imagining that that was going to cause my brother to stop asking. It didn't. And so he began to ask a little louder, "Mama, why is that woman's hair blue?" And so Mother took the next course of action. She looked over at my brother and she put the finger in front of her lips and she said, "Shh." It didn't work. Again, my brother said, "Mama, why is that woman's hair blue?" And I'm not sure what she tried next. But from then on, after she told that story, she would say, "I could never look that woman square in the eyes again." In fact, I don't know that she ever even told the story until after this woman was long in her grave. So there are things said that we wish wouldn't have been said. Is that right? And when we read New Testament scriptures, folks, there are things in the New Testament, things that Jesus says, that I wish sometimes he wouldn't have said. How about you? And as I say that, I'm not referring to embarrassing moments. Instead, I'm talking about the things that Jesus said that are very, very hard sayings. Things that he says that have a demanding kind of nature, that place upon us a deep set of expectations as to how we try to live out the Christian life. Indeed, as to whether we can even call ourselves Christian if we are unable to live up to these set of expectations. If we're reading the Gospel of Matthew, this is one of the examples. If we're reading the Gospel of Matthew, we find in there a place where Jesus takes a lot of sayings of his day, and then he adjusts them according to his own standards. So he always starts those sayings out with, "You have heard it said." We use that phrase today, don't we? You've heard it said that. Okay, so Jesus did that. He said, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." And you can imagine people, as they heard Jesus begin this saying, that they were ready to cheer for him. They were right there with him emotionally, right? Because that's the kind of thing that makes sense to us in the human sense of things. In our sense of justice, when somebody does us wrong, then we're supposed to dish it back to them. Exactly right? Right? But Jesus would then take those sayings and he would turn them around. And he would say, "You've heard it said, an eye for an eye, but I tell you that you are to live out of a sense of love in the Lord. You're not to repay evil for evil." And then he goes on in that same little group of sayings and he says, if someone will come to you and demand your coat, they'll demand that you take the very coat off your back. And of course we're sitting there thinking, never would we do that, because let that guy go out and get his own coat. And then he fills in the blank. He says, "But I tell you, if he asks for your coat, give him your cloak as well." What do you think people thought when Jesus said that? Do you think they said, "Wow, yeah, Jesus, that's great. That's a wonderful way to turn that saying around"? I'm sure they were sitting there thinking, "My goodness, how could I imagine living up to that?" And then some days there were people in the crowds or amongst Jesus' followers who were sitting and just pondering things idly and thinking about stuff like money and how great it would be to have more and how wonderful it would be to win the lottery. And here comes Jesus saying one of those hard sayings. "Don't store up treasures for yourself," he said, "on earth, where moth comes in or where rust destroys. But instead, store up for yourself treasures in heaven." And then he finishes that one up by saying something else. He says, "Because where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." One day a rich man comes to Jesus And, you know, people always, even if they gave Jesus and a person a little bit of space to talk privately, they are gathered around and they are watching and listening for what Jesus has to say. And so a rich man comes to Jesus, and you know the question he asks. It's an important question. What must I do, he says, to inherit eternal life? And Jesus had a way of dealing with people individually right where they are at the moment. And he had a way of knowing what was the greatest need, spiritually speaking. And he knew exactly the things that they must overcome in order to have a deeper spiritual life. And so you remember what he said to this guy. He said, go and sell everything that you have, and then come and follow me. Well, again, can you imagine how that rested with the people who were looking on? No doubt, these people looking on knew this man. They knew the kinds of goods that he owned. Probably some of them, if they were honest, were a little jealous of him. And yet they hear Jesus say, in order for you to inherit eternal life, you've got to get rid of all of this stuff that you own. All of this stuff that seems to take priority in your life. And instead, you've got to make me then the first priority for living. So Jesus has many, many hard statements. He has many things that you and I wish he would have left unsaid, because as he speaks them, they convict us of our failure to live up to exactly what's expected in the Christian life. Today's passage. If anyone comes after me and does not hate mother and father and sister and brother and wife and child and even life itself, that person cannot be my disciple. Now, talk about hard. Doesn't that just send us blinding as we hear his words? If his desire is to get our attention, he accomplishes that, right? Scholars tell us that we do have